Alderman Ravel, how are you?
Fine, thanks. How about you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Okay.
Nick, do we have quorum now?
No.
Oh, I thought
we needed 4 or 5.
I think we need a majority, which is 3 of 5.
Okay, we're good then.
Okay, perfect. Welcome to the March 1st Human Services Committee meeting. As a result of an executive order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker suspending in-person attendance requirements for public meetings, City Council members and city staff will be participating in this meeting remotely. Due to public health concerns, residents will not be able to provide public comment in person. Those wishing to make a public comment can submit to do so, and you do it virtually. I move approval.
Second.
We just need a roll call on that.
You're
I'm
muted,
sorry.
Lawrence.
Sorry, I was on
I
mute.
apologize. I'm sorry. Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Nicola, just real quick, are you going to do the roll calls or do you want me to do it?
I'm doing it. I was on mute and didn't realize it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Motion passes. Alderman Ravel, will you take HS1, please?
Sure. So is that approval of our minutes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I move approval of our minutes of our February 1st meeting.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there anyone signed up for public comment today?
Alderman, Madam Chair, I believe we have Denise Pareto, who is the chairwoman for the Parks and Recreation Board. I think she's here to speak to one of the items on the agenda. That's all that I have on my list. Nicola, do you have anything else?
No, I do not. Luke, did you get anything?
I have one other person, Patricia Gregory. I do not see her on this call. I did leave a voicemail for her to see if she was able to join. I have not heard back from her yet.
Thank you. Ms. Pareto, thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership on the Parks and Rec Board. And you have 5 minutes for public comment.
Okay, good evening. I am addressing the board regarding, hold on, the item number. The resolution 31R21, the approval of the City of Evanston Parks and Recreation Department's facility naming policy. I just basically wanted to give you some context for this and tell you that I'm in support of it. We were approached because a park in the 2nd Ward where I live was requested to be renamed. And we were going through this process of, wow, how do we rename a park? And what would be the parameters or criteria for that? And we began that process and debated it and really were moving down a path to set policy. But then COVID hit, and then the request was already on the table. And so, as you all know, that park was voted and approved to be renamed and co-renamed. But we see it as our responsibility to recommend policy to make sense for the future, because I think now that we've opened the door to renaming parks, that could be something that we spend a lot of time on, and we just don't think that's in the best interest of the city. And then the second piece of that is, as we were looking to do the renaming policy, we realized there wasn't really a solid policy in general about naming parks and features within parks. So we took the time and put together a committee, which is where most ideas die, but not when I lead them. So we got together in this virtual environment, and fortunately a new Parks and Rec board member had a lot of Parks and Rec experience like myself outside of this. And we were able to look at some other jurisdictions across the country and come up with something to recommend that I think Evanston can be proud of. And the reason I say that footnote is, as we all know, in the last year, I mean, the fact that we're even home right now, you know, we know that naming places is a very special thing, and it's something that is being revisited in a lot of places right now due to the history of our country. And so we wanted to put a policy in place that we felt would put Evanston in the best situation for the future. We don't see that there's going to be a lot of new parks built, but we do see that there could be requests for people asking to rename or redo things. And so we wanted to make sure that we put in place a policy that, you know, into the future can make it easier for the folks that are going to serve on this board long after I've retired. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing the discussion about it.
Make sure I'm muted.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Luke, did the other commenter show up? Or no?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. That concludes public comment. Alderman Braithwaite, will you please take HS1?
Alderman, since I don't have it, well, hold on one quick second. Let me pull it off my other screen. Alderman Ravel, if you have the item open, do you mind just, oh, here it is.
Okay.
Hold on one second, I'm sorry. H2 is progress report on the policing initiative. Staff recommends.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Yeah,
HS1, please.
oh, I'm sorry. It's the resolution to approve the city. I thought we just read HS1.
No, we just had public comment.
Oh, sorry. So I'll move HS1, which is 31-R21, approval for the City of Evanston Parks and Recs Department facility naming policy. It's for action.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Actually, is there any discussion? Alderman Ravel?
Well, I just want to say, especially with the Parks and Rec Board Chair here, to just say I thought it was a really thoughtful and very thorough policy. I really, you can tell the committee did a lot of hard work on that, and I think it's makes a lot of sense for the community, and I really appreciate your work, and I think we should move to send this on to City Council.
I completely agree with Alderman Ravel's comment. Thank you. Is there any other comment? All right, we could take the roll.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Alderman
All
Simmons,
right.
this is Alderman Fleming. Sorry. One of the sentences in there to make Mr. Hemingway, it's how text we were using it. I wanted to make sure we weren't, and if it was up in the services, just wanted to be clear on that for myself.
I apologize, Alderman Fleming. I could not understand what you said. It came through a little distorted.
She's back on mute. I couldn't hear her
I'm
either,
sorry.
Director.
Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't hear me? Oh, okay,
No.
never mind. I'm sorry. I'm in my car. I'm trying to get home. It was a question about, in 1B, there was a language, a reference to donation, and I just wasn't clear if that was a financial donation, if that was someone who had donated their, time and energies. I just wanted to be clear on that one piece.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it was in reference to financial donations.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Other than that, I also thought it was a very clear policy. I was surprised we didn't have one because I think some parks are already named after people. So I'm glad we put one in place now that covers a lot of things.
I wasn't sure if, well, she spoke at public comments. Now she's gone. Never mind.
She's not gone, but if you wanted Ms. Barretto to.
I thought she was speaking to the group.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any, did we take the roll on this?
I'm sorry, Chair. What's Alderman Fleming's vote? She asked a question instead of saying aye or nay.
I'm sorry. Alderman Fleming?
I'm an aye. I'm sorry I didn't hear us to call for a question. I thought we were having a discussion. I'm an aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. HS2, staff recommends member of the Human Services Committee accept and place on file the 2020 progress report on policing initiatives. The memo offers updated information regarding the police Q&A series, police training, mayor's 90-day pledge for police use of force, the alternatives to emergency response committee work, and certificate and accreditation process. I move approval for to accept and place on file.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Nope.
Alderman Ravel?
Well, I just had one question. It talks about, let me just find my little note here. That Northwestern Center for Public Safety provides some of the training that our police department received this past year and probably every year. This was for police management and leadership program and also some supervisor training. So I'm just wondering whether we get that training pro bono? I don't know if Chief Cook wants to.
Is Chief or your designated team member, can you respond to Alderman Ravel?
We didn't hear what she said. What did she say?
Oh, I'm just wondering whether the training that that the police department receives from Northwestern, whether that's a pro bono kind of service that they provide?
No, ma'am. We pay for all of the training that takes place at Northwestern, whether it's staff of command or a traffic-related school. They're the #1 in traffic. But Shelley Camden, who's the assistant director there, she does from time to time give us free schools on the staff of command level, which is probably the equivalent to $5,000 whenever she does it.
Right. I just think it'd be interesting to have that further conversation about that, about whether Northwestern couldn't make more of those kinds of services available to us pro bono.
Yeah, I just asked her, it's ironic you say that. I asked her about a month ago, seeing that we utilize the university for a large amount of our training dollars, if they could provide some additional pro bono classes. And she told me not at this time because they were having budgeted. But it is something that could be taken up on a higher level.
Okay, well, we should do that.
Yes, ma'am. I'll give you a call about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other discussion? If not, then we can take the roll.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Ravel?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming?
Aye.
Motion passes. Alderman Ravel, will you please take HS3?
Sure. This is Resolution 34-R-21, declaring lead pipe replacement throughout the city of Evanston to be a public benefit. Staff recommends approval of this resolution declaring replacement of lead pipes. Lead pipe used to construct water service lines is a public benefit and therefore allows public funds to be used to replace the portion of the water service line that is the property owner's responsibility to maintain and repair. This is for action. I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to commend Dave Stonebeck and his team for this. I think we've talked a lot about equity, and this is something that, they've done without, from my knowledge, a whole lot of, pushing on the council side. So thank you for making this happen. And I think a lot of residents will appreciate it as they try to make upgrades on their property this year.
I second Alderman Fleming's comments. If there's no further discussion,
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
aye.
Alderman Ravel?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming? Alderman Fleming? Did we lose her?
I'm sorry, aye.
Thank you.
HS4, Alderman Ravel, please.
So staff recommends that the Human Services Committee accept and place on file review of the Evanston Police Complaints and Comments Report. This is to accept and place on file. I move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
This is Alderman Fleming again. I have a couple questions. I went over to watch the videos for these today. One thing, Police Chief, I will ask is, before we used to have access to body camera footage, they could email it to us and we can use like a password to get in. If we could try to get that started again, that would be helpful, at least for me.
Okay.
But my question or
Do you have a password, Alderman, or do you need to get a new one?
I think I might need a new one. We haven't done it in a while, but it would be helpful instead of having to go to the police department. But I have a question about 2016.
Yes, ma'am.
And I guess my question has to do with, or comment really has to do with the procedures we're using. So it says that a city staff called 911 for a person that was sleeping. So more so my comment is that I thought that we had been working with Connections and Outreach and some other folks so that our staff, and this is not for you, Chief, but so our staff did not have to call 911. So if Kimberly's on the phone or someone else, I would like us to, revisit that so we don't have staff calling 911 just when we have people who are not necessarily posing a danger to someone. And then for Chief, if you could just make sure your officers have some whatever kind of referral, social service agency information with them so that when we do encounter people who are, sleeping in public spaces, they can actually be given some kind of referral versus in this case, they were just kind of told to move along. So I think that would be helpful for everybody involved. And then for 2017, I had some issues with this, although there was no findings, just again, with the same idea of customer service. I had some empathy for the woman who was in the video. I think the way she was spoken to by our officers wasn't in the most, professional and welcoming manner. And I understand we're not sure exactly what they were going to find there, but, rolling up on someone at 1 a.m. and flashing your light in their face without introducing yourself and telling them, what exactly you're approaching them for, I can see how that could leave one of our residents filing a complaint and being very upset about the interaction. So I would really just like us to revisit kind of the customer service piece of the police job, so that those kind of simple, interaction and conversation pieces take place to help with our community engagement efforts. And then the last one was 2001. I know that there was, I think a written suspension or 1 day or something given in that case. What I would like to see in the future, Chief, is if we could, and I think it mentioned doing this, but if we could start to add on our traffic stop collection sheets, the out of car request, because this young lady was asked to exit her car and she didn't. I know the dog sniffing is there, but if we could add that, I think that would be great in the future for us to have some data on who's been asked to get out of their car. And also if you could just work with your staff to revisit if it's a official rule or just practice of business when someone asks that a supervisor is called, that's something that they don't get pushback on from the officer and that they get that responded. I know that happened eventually in this call, but the fact that it had to take so long for this young lady to have her request handled was a little bit frustrating.
Okay, yep, we'll take care of that. No problem, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Ravel?
Well, I just had one question on page 48 of our packet.
You want a date for,
It mentioned that the complainant didn't feel safe coming to the police department to sign a formal complaint register. And prior to COVID, complainants used to be able to come to the Civic Center, correct? But now, if the Civic Center is not open to the public, it is in fact coming to the police department the only place people can do that?
no ma'am, they can go online.
Okay.
Or they can call in to 311.
Okay, so she didn't need to come into the police department.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, she can go online. The complaint form is online.
Okay.
And Alderwoman, just so you know too, Commander Glue and I recently went down to Chicago and met someone at a neutral location because they didn't want to come into the police department. So we're always willing to do that, to meet with the complainant.
But if I can add one more thing, we've also, with regards to picking up complaints, if somebody either is unable or uncomfortable to come into the station, we've also gone and met them, whether it's at their residence or a place they're choosing, pick up that documentation when reasonable and time allows, and there has not been a situation yet where it hasn't been reasonable and time did not allow for it. So if somebody needs to speak to us, they need to be interviewed, they need to drop off documentation, we have a very much an approach of that we will get it done.
Okay. Yeah, because
Without the box.
that's an important thing for our residents to know.
And Alderman Ravel and council members, I just pasted a link to the complaint form process on the police website in the chat box. It explains the whole process, including the links to the form.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
You know, when our new dashboard is up, which we're gonna have a presentation on that tonight, we're gonna have that type of information where they can go do that on there also.
Okay.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Alderman Fleming,
Aye. I'm sorry. I said aye, sorry. Aye.
report has been accepted and placed on file. Are there any items for discussion? Items for communication, we have HS1, language accessibility update. Is there a staff member to give that update?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paulina Martinez, Assistant to the City Manager. I come here today to provide you with a quick update on the language access guidelines and what we have achieved so far. A lot of the stuff is summarized in the memorandum, but in January 2020 is when we completed the internal language access guidelines and started taking actions to implement those guidelines in order to contribute to the operationalization of equity. One of the items that we call for in the guidelines is contracting with a language over the phone interpretation service that also provides video interpretation service. That contract was actually implemented in March 2020, right before the pandemic. So it came in very timely, especially for a lot of our contact tracers who have heavily used the service. So from April to December 2020, city staff handled 217 phone calls, which equate to 4,478 minutes. 88% of those calls were requests in Spanish, but also in the memo, provide a summary of all the languages that were requested, which include Greek, French Creole, French, Polish, among others. We also implemented a request form for staff to request translation services as well as interpreter on live interpreters, right? So for meetings, I would say that request form has become very popular lately. A lot more of our staff members are using it and being more mindful about providing at least a translation in Spanish for a lot of the literature that they're putting out. Last year, we also translated a total of 37 documents among newsletters, flyers, and things of that nature. This does not include any of the translations that the Evanston Public Library did. But for this year, we do have the goal of translating about 65 documents that we have identified as vital documents. And for this year, through the Good Neighbor Fund at Northwestern University has earmarked for equity projects. We have requested a $50,000 allocation that would allow us to cover professional translations of a lot of our documents. So this will definitely help with the documents that I was referring to earlier, and a lot of interpretations for meetings as requested. So actually, as part of those vital documents are the Parks and Recreation Guide, which we have already translated and published the first edition of that in Spanish. You can find it in the website. And we have also kicked off a partnership with Literacy Works that is going to be training a cohort of staff to look at our online communications, so through our website, and making sure that we're using simple language that is accessible to all readers, regardless of their literacy level. And we continue trying to build relationships with our Spanish and Creole speaking populations to make sure that we adjust as we go based on the needs of the population. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't, other than thank you. Thank you for getting this done. Excited to see it implemented.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion from the committee? Alderman Ravel?
Yeah, no, I think this is really great that we're making this kind of progress. Could you just talk us through what happens? So if a Spanish speaking, or well, anyone calling, they call 311 and it's clear that they need somebody to be able to talk to them in Spanish, let's say. So does our 311 operator, what happens with?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So first, we do have Spanish speakers in 311, right? So I'm sure that Sue Ponarelli could give you like the step-by-step, but usually when you do call 311, you have the option to say like whether you need service in English or Spanish, right? So in that sense, it's kind of set. But for any other language, if they need assistance in Spanish, we have distributed documents to staff on how to handle those calls, right? So like from like making sure that they're speaking slowly to staff, to the caller and saying, you know, give me just 1 second, I will get an interpreter on the line. And then they just have to dial the phone number to the service. And then if they don't know what language this person is needing assistance with, that is something that the company that we contracted with can help with. They can help identify that language. And then usually it's kind of like a three-way call. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And so far the feedback that I have gotten from the staff members who have been using the service is that it's really helpful and it's pretty easy to use.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Pauline. It looks like there's no further discussion and no action needed since it is for.
I have a question. This is Alderman Clark. Thank you, Pauline, for working on this. My question is, I know this is, I think 2 years ago, the Spanish community came to us, or Latin community, and spoke Spanish. My question is, why did we do the guidelines versus a policy? I know you're very committed and you've been really championing this with staff. My concern with guidelines versus a policy is that, if you leave or whoever leaves, that this is not really something implemented. Also, have we talked about or thought through financing long-term once the Northwestern dollars are gone this year?
Absolutely. Those are all great questions. So thank you for asking that. Like you and I have had conversations about why there were guidelines versus a policy. And at the time, given the limited resources that we had, it was recommended that we went through guidelines so that way we could adjust as we went through the motions of trying to figure out how and when and what was appropriate at the time. we have discussed this at length with the Equity and Empowerment Commission, who also have concerns about accountability and obviously, well, what happens when, like Paulina leaves, right? If and when that happens. And like I mentioned to you, that is something that I'm very mindful of, just because it's a lived experience that I have. So I'm trying to be very mindful about creating systems that bring in other staff members besides myself. So not making myself the only one who's translating documents or connecting people to interpreters, right? So bringing in the communications team to make sure that they take ownership, part of the ownership of this. That's why I created for example, the request form for interpretation and translation services. So whenever that request comes in, I'm not the only one who gets that request. I am the main point of contact, but I have backups when I'm out of the office, or, like when I leave, then someone else will be taking ownership of that. So making sure that we're creating the systems that involve different staff members. And it's part of the larger equity work to make sure that, we create the culture that this is important work that needs to be always taken into consideration in terms of accountability. It was a recommendation of the Equity and Empowerment Commission that we create a resolution that calls out for this work to be incorporated into the operations of the city. And my understanding, and I don't want to be misquoted, so Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong here, but, making sure that there is a budget item, a permanent budget item in the budget for language accessibility.
And then how are we handling, aside from, I know the COVID sign-up sheet is in Spanish, but how are we handling things in our health department? I think there's only one Spanish speaker there, if I'm correct. And so, how are we making sure that all those documents are translated, people are getting information there?
I'm not sure what COVID sign-up sheet you're
There's like the COVID vaccine. Sorry, there's the COVID vaccine sign-up sheet, which I know is in Spanish. And I know we've done a lot around COVID, but my concern would be the follow-up, particularly in the health department now with coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, so like follow-up once people sign up for the vaccine, is that what you mean?
No, just follow up in the operations in the health department in general, right? So our health department probably have been kind of quiet, and then we have COVID. And so I imagine we'll be, more interest and more folks calling the health department, even past the COVID vaccine. And so thinking through staffing and translation and, all the documents they produce there ideally are on the essential list that you mentioned to be translated through the Northwestern money.
Correct, yeah. And we have started translating some of the email communications that we have that we're automatically sending out, right? So like when you sign up, you automatically get an email that said, hey, we received your submission, thank you, right? So that's available in Spanish now. I think Greg and his team have been very mindful about making sure that that they're thinking about that. It's been a learning curve for them, and it's something that they're definitely learning on the fly for their team. It's something new to them, but they're trying to be as mindful as possible. So they have been relying on Spanish-speaking members of staff when reaching out to people. So that's one thing. But, the over-the-phone interpretation service is really meant to be that tool that bridges the gap, because although we have bilingual people on staff, we cannot control the quality of that interpretation. So that's really what that over-the-phone interpretation service is there for. And as we continue doing the internal equity work that needs to be done, especially with like the Ready Committee, who is working to making sure that equity initiatives are operationalized in each department, and that we kind of like have a representative that speaks for equity, that will be a bigger part of, continuing the work.
Okay, well, thank you for taking the lead on this. I know you've worked on it for a long time, and hopefully, as you said, we can set this up as an internal system that operates regardless if you or anyone else are here in place. And so I would support us turning this into a policy sooner than later. So it is something that's, required and expected, and the community is clear on our commitment. And then we can look as the council through next year's budget to make sure there's funding also to support that.
So, Alderman, this is Kimberly Richardson, Deputy City Manager. I just want to speak to the policy, and I just want us to be mindful that we have a lot of policies that are on the books that are not always implemented, and a lot of that has to do with training as well as resources. And so while I understand the need for the word policy, I think the understanding that the reason for guidelines was implemented was because we're still, again, as Paulina mentioned, trying to test out what works best in our organization and not to penalize our staff, but instead to train staff. My hope is to operationalize language access, not just as an individual staff person within the department, but every staff person who is engaging publicly with the community, regardless if they're driving a refuse truck or they're at a counter, should understand how to communicate with the public, both in English and in other. So as understanding as to accountability is needed for regarding the term policy to me is just compliance. I want us to make this be as part of our culture, that it's just something that we do. It's not something that has to be, used as not a penalty if we don't do it correctly, but more as a way of, again, community engagement as a broader conversation. So having a dedicated fund to support that work, looking at how do we look at positions over the long term and bringing in bilingual community speakers into our organization, and understanding how do we support those individuals internally who want to continue to be volunteers in a way that they're compensated correctly for their extra work if that's needed. So we are looking at it more holistically, and a policy to me, I think, will kind of put that into a static document versus right now where we're at in the infant stages of implementation. So it will be something once we can test it for a year, look at how well this current language is, that we can come back and say this is a policy. But right now, until that training as well as just testing and involving happens, I would just caution us not to initially just go straight to a policy language.
Well, thank you for that piece. I for sure don't want a policy we're not going to follow. I would also want us to make sure that our residents who are depending on us to be able to communicate with them in whatever is said language know that we're serious about it. And so my concern, again, comes from speaking to folks in the community who have not really seen that commitment from us, given that it's been a couple of years. And I know we've transitioned staff in the equity department. So that is the concern I'm speaking of.
I appreciate that. And I'm gladly to say that Equity Empowerment Commission has also been very strong in their concern. So working with them, I think it's more than just a policy. We have to figure out how do we do community engagement better as a whole. So thank you. And to hold us accountable is important. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if we train our staff so they understand the expectation that's been asked of them, and not just, give them tools without the training behind those tools. Alderman Simmons, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Yep.
Thank you. Patricia Gregory, thank you for signing up for public comment. We called you earlier. I understand that you're here now. If you'd like to unmute yourself, and you have 5 minutes for public comment.
Okay, I'm just wondering what the procedures are when a police officer is called out because of a gun, because we had a neighbor who called us the N-word and said he hated niggas, he kills niggas, he does all that. Then he went up the alley and interrupted some guys that were sitting in the alley. He fussed and cussed at them. Then he had a gun riding on his bike up and down the alley. Then he threatened my son with the gun and said that he was a dead man walking. So my son is a veteran. He has PTSD and a couple other things going on. So we called the police out, and the police officer came and made all the other officers walk away. And he said to me that of course he cannot go in the gentleman's garage because he didn't have a search warrant. and that if anything else happened between us and this gentleman or anybody else in the neighborhood, to call him. So that just was very concerning to me. And so I just I wanted to know, is that the proper procedure? Because then the next day, another neighbor of mine called the city and wanted to know if this guy was back there breaking up concrete. Was it the city's property? What to do? So she met me in the front, and she was telling me about this. And so the same police officer pulled up and told us that this guy was breaking up concrete and doing work at his house and not to bother him. And nobody was bothering him, but it's just very concerning. I just wanted to know the procedures and how that works.
Thank you for your comment. Chief, if you could respond to what we can expect in the event someone is threatening with a gun, using racial slurs, whatever's happening with the breaking up of the concrete. And then if you could contact Ms. Gregory directly and learn more about her specific incident and how we can support her.
And Alderman Simmons, before Chief Cook comments, good evening, Ms. Gregory. How are you? This is Alderman Braithwaite speaking. I know that you may be calling in.
Right. Can I say something really quick? I just want to say that the situation was taken care of after a while. We called Alderman Braithwaite. He came in immediately and started to work with us and trying to change the atmosphere and to change the situation and turn things around. And he did a great job in helping us. You know, this had been going on for some years, as I understood. So I want to let you know again, Alderman Braithwaite, I appreciate your help. And also Chief Cook, I appreciate him coming in and helping us to diffuse this situation.
Yeah, and thank you, Ms. Gregg. I was just going to share, and thank you very much, because the situation, Alderman Simmons, members of the committee, and anyone else that would listen after this, it was probably one of the worst situations that I've seen in town in terms of dealing with mental illness in a really just long, drawn-out situation. So Mrs. Gregory is correct. We were able to solve it once everyone got on the same page. So just to make it clear, like, the situation that she brought up was all I wanted to say has been resolved. And Chief, I'll let you answer to the calls for services and the response of the officers. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, I did speak with Ms. Gregory about the incident. The young man that she was talking about had some mental challenges, so that played a factor into this. But what you could expect is the police service. The officer was correct, because the guy had went into his garage and was being cooperative, so they just couldn't barge up in there without a search warrant. But we did track him down, and he had like a BB gun. Yeah, he was using a BB gun as a way to threaten people. And he was arrested. We arrested him 3 or 4 times, and he was eventually moved out of that residence by his family. So I don't know what happened when Officer Tamburino was there that you feel was not in the right way, done in the right way, Ms. Gregory, but when we reviewed it, he did act properly. I don't know what it was. Sometimes you hit it off bad with people, or could have been in a better mood. I'm not sure what it was, but the officer didn't do anything wrong on that initial incident.
Well, all I want to say is this. I know the initial incident, he did tell us that he wasn't able to go in or really kind of help us, but call him later. But then the next day when he came out and said to us, you know, this guy's out there doing work and he doesn't want to be bothered, made everybody feel, and not just me, but other neighbors feel as if the police were protecting this guy and allowing him to do whatever he wanted to do. And he was kind of using the police to do that. But then I understand that that's what he was used to doing, like calling the police out saying this person's bothering me and that person's bothering me, and then the police would come over and deal with that person instead of dealing with him. So I appreciate all your help and work on this, Chief, and getting back to me in a timely manner so that we could resolve this issue.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Pat. Anytime, you know, you could call me day or night.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gregory.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ms. Gregory, for your comment, and to all that have participated in our meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Want to roll call us out?
Sorry.
All right, I think I see Chief's hand up.
Yes, ma'am. Are we adjourning for the night, Alderman, or because
We are.
Okay, because we were expecting to give you all a presentation on the dashboard.
Ooh.
Oh, did I skip
That
it
wasn't
on
on
the?
no, it wasn't on the agenda. I had asked City Manager Storley about it. I thought she said she moved it to next month.
Okay, all right.
So, Chief, yeah, the two issues that I'd asked did not hit the agenda. And so, in speaking, we didn't have a chance to touch base, but we had talked about it, Alderman Simmons, in the mayor's committee, and I had made the request, but didn't contact you or the appropriate staff. So the communication didn't flow all the way through the channel is what I've learned.
So let's make sure it's on record now that it gets
Yeah.
on.